Good evening and welcome. Tonight, National Assembly demands the extension of CBN's deadline for the return of old naira notes by 6 months. House of Representatives moves to probe complaints of shortage of the new notes by banks. No extension of return of old naira notes beyond January 31st, the central bank insists, as its Monetary Policy Committee raises to lending rates to 17.5% with other parameters unchanged. A first phase of the Lagos Blue Rail Line comes on stream as the president inaugurates the project. Witnesses to the signing of the second phase of the transport facility as part of his 2-day visit to Lagos.
On business news tonight, Central Bank Governor launches forensic audit into alleged missing 89 trillion naira stamp duty receipts.
On sports news tonight, Premier League clubs break the record for transfer spending during the January window with a £440 million spree barely 1 week to the end of the transactions.
And from Abuja, the nation's capital, state houses of assembly reject autonomy for local governments in their constitution amendment resolutions. Senate directs transmission of 35 out of 44 bills to the president for assent.
And in international news from London, the US state of California is reeling from its third mass shooting in 8 days after a man shot dead 7 former co-workers south of San Francisco.
The dust raised by the central bank's deadline on the return of old naira notes is yet to die down. The National Assembly is asking the CBN to extend the deadline by 6 months. The federal lawmakers are also lamenting what they describe as a hardship the policy is causing Nigerians as they try to deposit their own notes and get new ones. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives has set up an ad hoc committee to investigate the complaints by the banks on shortage of the notes. Our correspondent Terry Kumi reports.
There are 7 days left to the termination of the use of the old 200, 500 and 1,000 naira notes following the introduction of new notes by the Central Bank of Nigeria. Since the central bank's announcement on this new monetary policy, federal lawmakers have been kicking against the move, describing it as hasty. Tuesday's plenary in the Senate was no exception, as senators argued for and against the extension of the deadline.
Mr. President, let me say to you, in my constituency, especially in my local government, 90% of the people have not seen the new notes at all. They have not had a glimpse of the new notes.
We could not extend it. I want to assure you that there's no time we will reach and we say we are satisfied. So I want to oppose this motion. I want to stand with the CBN that the argument they have enunciated is good enough.
The Senate therefore resolves that the CBN should immediately extend the use of the old notes by 6 months. That is from January 31st to July 31st, 2023, with immediate effect.
In the lower chamber, the recommendation for extension of the deadline for the use of the old naira notes is also 6 months, as lawmakers question the availability of the new notes as well.
Worried that due to inadequate sensitization and the rush in the implementation of the policy, the country is exposed to a situation whereby businesses are rejecting the old currencies. Today's newspapers are awash with the reportage of all these cases around the country.
As a result of Boko Haram insurgents, somebody that controls more than 5 filling stations, 10 tankers, is reduced to a beggar that he had to line up in an IDP camp to collect 20 or 10 kg of rice or guinea corn. And the little they have now to pick the pieces of their lives to go back to their constituents, so that at the end of the period, they can pick the pieces of their lives and continue. If on 31st January, this currency swap, is going to be stopped, and the old currency is going to be more or less a tissue paper, definitely we have a lot to lose, especially in the Northeast sub-region and Borno State in particular.
The House then resolves to set up a committee to meet with the bank operators and the Apex Bank on the availability of the new notes.
Somebody is not giving us the full story or the full picture. Is it the banks that are not telling us the truth and are hoarding the money? Or is it CBN that is actually not not familiar with what has gone out and what hasn't gone out.
The House commends the policy but says its implementation is too abrupt and will be unfair to the incoming government. They go further to ask the president to intervene. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
For the CBN, there's no going back on the January 31st deadline for the return of the old naira notes. Apex Bank is insisting the 200, 500 and 1,000 notes will cease to be legal tender in the country on that date. The CBN governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, reiterated the Apex Bank's stance after the Monetary Policy Committee meeting in Abuja, explaining that enough time had been given to Nigerians to make the swap. As part of his decision at the Monetary Policy Committee meeting, the lending rates saw a raise to 17.5%, with other parameters left unchanged.
It is the first Monetary Policy Committee meeting for the year, and the impact of global events in 2022 on the Nigerian economy was considered in reaching some of the decisions at this meeting. The Russian invasion of Ukraine exacerbated the global economy, which is still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. An offshoot of this is the impact on Nigeria, which includes rising inflation, especially on food and general household items. The committee analyzed the situation before reaching a decision of the lending rates and other parameters.
MPs voted to 1. Raise MPR to 17.5%, 2. Retain the asymmetric corridor at plus 100 and minus 700 basis points around the corridor, and 3. Retain the CRR at 2.5%, and 4. Retain the liquidity ratio at 30%.
Although the raise in the lending rate is expected following some of the economic indices in the country, the central bank insists that some of its decisions are yielding results, especially the new naira notes.
I must say here that unfortunately I don't have good news for those who feel that we should shift the deadline. My apologies. The reason is because for us 90 days, in fact we feel it's 100 days is enough for anybody who has money or the old currency to deposit the money in the banks.
The Apex Bank also clarified his support for the federal government through the Ways and Means advances.
We feel as CBN, because we're a lender of last resort, that it will be irresponsible for us to sit idle. It will be a dereliction in our responsibility and duties as a lender of last resort to ignore the government and allow the economy and our Nigerians to suffer. Ladies and gentlemen, what we did by lending to government as banker and lender of last resort is normal in any part of the world, particularly when countries face crisis.
The bank expects these efforts to yield speedy results as it continues to seek ways to control all inflationary indices.
Joining me now to discuss is Managing Director and CEO Financial Derivatives Company, Mr. Bismarck Rewani. Thank you for joining me tonight. And I see you're at our magic wall. A lot to discuss today, especially the MPR that has been raised to 17.5% as announced by the CBN governor. It's been raised 5 times, hasn't it, in the last 10 months? So yet inflation rates is on the decline. Beg your pardon, it has not declined. Is this the medicine or is this the dose?
Yeah, thank you very much. Like we say here, the central bank, the MPC, not the central bank, the Monetary Policy Committee bit the bullet, right? By going up 100 basis points to 17.5% per annum. But the monetary policy rate is not a lending rate, it's a signaling rate to the market. So the actual rates are a composition of other rates, which includes treasury bill rates and all of that. So what do we mean by this? You send the signaling rate up to 17.5% per annum, but the treasury bill rates for 90-day paper is down at 2%, and also the treasury bill rate for 1-year paper is at about 8%. So the signaling rate is up, but the actual rates are down, mixed signals. So inflation is still a cankerworm, like you can see here, 5 times in 10 months, but all that we've seen is 13 basis points reduction in inflation as against a 600, that is 6% increase in total cumulative interest rates increase for this period. So that's important to note that. So again, it's the medicine is right, but the dose is inaccurate. The only way to do this is to make sure that the other rates in the economy go up, and then it begins to affect what we call the marginal propensity to save, which actually helps to tame inflation.
Yeah, indeed. But I also understand that monetary policy does have its limits, and that's something that you have been talking about recently, isn't it? So why is that so?
Well, monetary policy tools, basically monetary policy complements fiscal policy. So the tools for monetary policy have a limit. What you've done, you've seen that in spite of all of these increases of up to 6%, you've had only a marginal decrease in inflation. Because, and if you go to the next slide, you will find that, you see, there was candor today that the Monetary Policy Committee was candid. Inflation is still biting, growth is tepid, and naira is embattled. Fact. But he also said, with some humor, that status quo is in the dustbin, yes. Loosening is in the Atlantic Ocean, yes. But the Treasury bill rates are declining. So you cannot signal higher rates at the same time. And the federal government of Nigeria is seeking to borrow for 40 years at 9% per annum with a 3-year moratorium. So, on one hand, businesses should borrow at 17.5 plus, but the federal government of Nigeria wants to borrow for 40 years at 9% per annum. There's some, we need to reconcile this so that there's, things complemented. They complement one another. In other words, the monetary conditions are loose while the monetary policy is tight. We must reconcile that.
And so that we're not talking over the heads of, the common man on the streets.
Yes.
What does all of this mean to him?
Well, interestingly, we broke this down into 3 particular segments. If you go forward, you'll find that, you go to the next slide, please. You'll find that we took a bag of rice. January is the period when prices come down. The price of rice in 2021, January, was 17,000 naira, and now it is 38,000 naira. January. It went up to 45,000 during the Christmas. We went down to see what a bag of beans, there you are. Yeah. A bag of beans was 22,000 naira in January 2021. It's now 32,000 naira. It's gone up 45%. Tomatoes, 7,000 naira in January 2021. It's now 129%. And if that's not enough, a loaf of bread in January 2021 was 400 naira. It's now 900 naira, 125%. Chicken, if you can afford it, was 800 naira in January 2021. It's 2,001, 50%. That's not all. That's your food basket. Bread and butter issues. Yeah. Next slide. You will find here a bus ride from Obalende to Oronshoki was 200 naira in January 2021. It's now 400 naira, 100% up. Flight ticket to Abuja was 35,000 one way in 2021. It's now 100,000 naira, 186%.
Higher in some instances.
Thank God, MTN Airtel, the data bundle was 5,000 in January 21. It's now still 5,000 naira. So some good things. Next slide. You'll find here, in 2015, if you divided all our income by the population, every Nigerian had a value of $2,700, but now it's gone down marginally by 14% to $2,300. But in 2015, if you divided our external debt by the population, every Nigerian was owing $49.
Yeah.
Today, those Nigerians are owing $215. So it's up 339%. Well, it's secondary school. Primary schools, let's look at secondary schools. You paid 2.5 million naira in 2015 per annum. You are paying 7.1 million naira today. So that's what it is. So what next? That's a big issue.
Yeah, and what next? Then?
What next? Well, the big thing here is that February inflation numbers will come out on the 15th of February, and the elections will be on February 25th. But you see, whether you like it or not, the central bank has done its own. The policy issue they've dealt with it. But the point is that after the presidential election, we are told, and INEC has confirmed or guaranteed that there will be free, fair, credible elections.
So
there will be a change. But Winston Churchill said this, and please note that a change is as good as a rest. Thank you.
We'll interpret that as much as we can. Thank you so much, Mr. Rewani, for being here. In part two, after the break, the first phase of the Lagos Blue Rail Line comes on stream as the president inaugurates the project. Witnesses the signing of the second phase of the transport facility as part of his two-day visit to Lagos. That's in a moment. To join us again. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television. Here's a reminder of our top stories. National Assembly demands extension of CBN's deadline for the return of old naira notes by 6 months. House of Representatives moves to probe complaints of shortage of the new notes by banks. No extension of return of old naira notes beyond January 31st. The central bank insists as its Monetary Policy Committee raises lending rates to 17.5%. First phase of the Lagos Blue Rail Line comes on stream as the president inaugurates the project. Witnesses the signing of the second phase of the transport facility. The U.S. state of California reels from its third mass shooting in 8 days. About a month after the completion of the first phase of the Lagos Blue Rail Line project, the president has formally commissioned the facility. President Muhammadu Buhari also witnessed the signing of the commencement of the phase 2 of the project from Mile 2 to Okokomaiko area of the city. He also commissioned the J.K. Randall Center for Yoruba Culture and History, wrapping up his two-day working visit to Lagos. Our correspondent, Dari Dowu, reports.
It's the second day of the president's working visit to Lagos, and its project commissioning engagements begin with the newly built John Randall Center for Yoruba Culture and History. Located at the loop of Winikon Roundabout, Lagos Island, the center is remodeled into a recreation and tourism spot. A part of plans by the state government to transform the state into a hub for tourism and recreational activities. The president then moves to Marina, the venue of the second event and one of the Lagos Blue Rail Line stations.
Welcome, His Excellency, the President, Federal Republic of Nigeria.
A Chinese construction corporation, CCECC, executed the rail infrastructure. The country's ambassador to Nigeria, in his remarks, says the Blue Line is a sustainable project.
Ceremony line of harmony of Nigeria and China. We seek to harmony in coexistence, harmony in integration, harmony in diversity, and harmony in development. So, Mr. Governor, are you happy? Are you satisfied?
For the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, the rail project has received tremendous assistance from the federal government.
With your government, we have received tremendous support, especially on the Lagos-Badagry Express route, which is the main corridor for this rail project. And Mr. President, it is also on track that we will be commissioning the Red Line before the end of your administration. That, in fact, is even a bigger, better, longer rail corridor, which we're excited with the collaboration of the Nigerian Railway Corporation, where we're sharing the rail corridor.
The president also witnessed the signing of the contract for the construction of the second phase of the Blue Line project. It takes a 10-minute ride from Marina on the elevated train corridor to the nearest station at the National Theatre. The completion of infrastructure for the first phase of the rapid transit system was launched in December 2022. The completed tracks, spanning 13 kilometers from Mile 2 to Marina, covers 5 stations and will run on high electricity voltage. Dari Idowu, Channels Television News.
Let's get more stories now. Here's Maokwe Ogun Yusuf in Abuja. Hi, Maokwe.
Hello, Amarachi. Well, that might be something to cheer for Lagosians, but it looks like it might be a mixed bag here, as 27 state houses of assembly have forwarded their resolutions on 35 constitution amendment bills to the National Assembly. Out of the 44 constitution amendment bills forwarded to the state lawmakers for passage, only 35 were voted for by 24 out of the 36 state houses of assembly. The states rejected autonomy for local governments. Our Senate correspondent, Linda Akigbe, reports.
Better late than never, as it seems that the amendments of the 1999 Constitution by the Ninth Assembly may not be an exercise in futility after all. This is because 27 state houses of assembly have finally forwarded their resolutions on 35 constitution amendment bills to the National Assembly. The constitution review process had hit a brick wall as 25 state houses of assembly threatened to take no action on the bills unless 4 more constitution amendment bills are considered and passed by the National Assembly. The Deputy Senate President, Senator Ovie Omagege, had accused state governors of trying to stall the process of further amendment to the nation's constitution. However, at the resumption of legislative proceedings on Tuesday, the chairman of the Senate Committee on Judiciary discloses a turnaround by some state houses of assembly.
The Senate and the House of Representatives approved 44 of the bills without difference and were transmitted to the State Houses of Assembly for their resolution on the 27th of March 2022.
Some of the 35 constitution alteration bills, which have been approved by not less than 24 state houses of assembly, include devolution of powers as regards railways, national grid system, airports and correctional services, separation of the office of the Attorney General of the Federation and State from the office of the Minister and Commissioner of Justice, creation of the office of the Accountant General of the Federation, financial autonomy of state legislatures and state judiciary, power to summon the President and governors. But one critical constitutional amendment sought for by the National Assembly was not passed: financial and administrative autonomy for local government councils.
The National Assembly had done its work. Now, in the State House of Assembly, those particular amendments that many Nigerians feel are so critical and crucial for entrenching democracy in Nigeria have not passed.
The Senate is asking the remaining 9 state houses of assembly that are yet to forward their resolutions on the constitutional amendment bills to do so to fulfill their constitutionally imposed legislative obligation. The Senate has also directed the Clerk of the National Assembly to transmit the 35 constitutional amendment bills that have so far met the requirement of the provision of Section 9, Subsection 2 of the Constitution to President Buhari for assent. Linda Akigbe, Channels Television News.
From legislative matters, now we move on to politics. As politicians continue to make campaign promises, the People's Democratic Party presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar says he'll ensure that there is no strike by university lecturers if he's elected. He stated this at the PDP Presidential Campaign rally in Asaba, the Delta State capital, which is attended by a huge crowd of supporters. Mr. Abubakar says the plans he has outlined in his recovery agenda will address many challenges that Nigeria is currently faced with. Our correspondent, Emperor Simon, reports.
The People's Democratic Party presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar arrives at Stephen Keshi Stadium in Asaba alongside members of his campaign team. The venue is flooded with a sea of supporters from across the state. As the campaign kicks off, PDP leaders from Delta State, including the party's governorship candidate, take turns to address the people.
The things that we have started here, no state in this country has done it. From 1999, Delta State has not failed. Not now that it will fail. Let me see you, let me see.
The PDP vice presidential candidate, Governor Ifeanyi Okoh of Delta State, alongside his wife, leaves no one in doubt of how much joy he feels over the turnout at the rally.
And with a fine president, when get real capacity. With a fine president, when get Obonga experience. And we know say Atiku don't get Obonga experience as vice president for 8 years. And the man, not be only for government, he carry get knowledge. Oh. This man don't get plenty knowledge for private sector. So he know how to handle Nigeria.
The PDP camp also got some boost as it receives the campees, including the state secretary of the All Progressives Congress.
This is Labour. Do you accept him?
Yes. The PDP presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar mounts the stage with his wife, Mrs. Titi Abubakar, alongside other members of his campaign team.
Everybody follow Atiku don't come, Atiku don't come, Waziri don't come, Adamawa don't come. Everybody follow.
Before his speech, he received the endorsement by the National Association of Nigerian Students, NANS, South-South region.
Is Atiku not looking very presidential here?
He then addresses the crowd.
You must have read my 5-point agenda. One of those agendas is education. I want to commend this young man who, on behalf of all the students in Niger Delta, have today endorsed our candidature. And in my policy document, as far as education is concerned and the responsibility of the federal government is concerned, I said there shall be no more ASU strike.
While in Delta State, Mr. Abubakar will commission some projects executed by the Delta State Governor. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the Labour Party Presidential Campaign Council has been reacting to what it describes as an attack on its presidential candidate, Mr. Peter Obi, in Katsina State yesterday. In a press statement signed by the head of its media campaign council, Diron Onifade, Mr. Obi was attacked by hoodlums who threw stones, causing some damage to the vehicle he was riding in on his way to the airport after he met with women in a town hall and a hugely successful rally at the Mohammed Dikko Stadium. He explains, however, that Mr. Obi and other occupants of the car were unhurt. The statement further adds that another set of thugs threw stones outside the stadium, which damaged several vehicles. While suspecting that the two incidents may have been premeditated by desperate politicians to show a false claim that they had the Northwest, in spite of support by the obedience movement in the region, the Labour Party Presidential Campaign Council calls on security agencies to investigate the attacks to forestall a recurrence. Still ahead on the news at 10, the central bank governor launches forensic audit into alleged missing 89 trillion naira stamp duty receipts. Well, that's on business news. You join us again. Welcome back to the news at 10. Now, against the backdrop of presidential candidates going to London's Chatham House to speak on their manifestos, the presidential candidate of the Social Democratic Party, Prince Adewale Adebayo, believes that charity should begin at home. The lawyer and entrepreneur gave his position when he appeared at the Nigeria Institute of International Affairs, the NIIA, to deliver a lecture on Nigeria's foreign policy and answer questions as to his thoughts and plans for Nigeria and Nigerians.
Hold back their names a little bit wider.
One would think that the Nigeria Institute of International Affairs has no business with the upcoming presidential elections in Nigeria. But as recent events at Chatham House have shown, Nigeria's foreign policy is a reflection of its domestic policy and politics. Hence, the Institute's decision to organize a platform for presidential candidates to exhibit their understanding of this. The first guest honoring the invitation is the presidential candidate of the Social Democratic Party, the SDP, Prince Adewale Adebayo, who spoke on the topic, the world of Nigeria and Nigeria in the world, foreign policy as an adjunct of domestic priorities.
Before I go out to do the diplomacy of collecting more, I must do the domesticity of using what I have well. The first priority of our government is abolition of poverty. And it has its own diplomatic side. The majority of it has to do with accountability in our government at home.
During a question and answer session after, he takes on topics such as the state of Nigeria's missions abroad, insecurity in Africa, a war in Ukraine, among others.
We have to do economic diplomacy, we have to do security diplomacy, we have to do humanitarian diplomacy, we have to do cultural diplomacy. So people have to be capable of being useful to the country before we send them out.
It's a robust conversation among former career diplomats, traditional rulers, Nigeria's security forces, journalists and researchers at the NIIA. Prince Adebayo later emphasizes his confidence at winning the upcoming polls.
My chances depend on two things. Nigerians being determined to change course this time. If Nigerians don't want the status quo, then they will look in our direction. Second, we've been making the case that there's less risk in voting for someone like me who is coming for the first time than sticking with the status quo they know is sure to fail.
The Director General of the NIIA, Professor Hossein Sagai, explains why fora like this is important for all seeking political office.
In recent times, the world has opened its doors to Nigeria in more significant ways than ever before, because these are changing times in the global order. And Nigeria needs to take its rightful place.
He hopes more presidential candidates will honor invitations from the Institute and provide Nigerians a more rounded view of their prospective leaders. Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
Well, that's all from Abuja. It's back now to you, Amarachi.
Thank you, Maokwe. Well, here in Lagos, the Director General of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA, Mr. Bashir Jamo, says a Lekki Deep-Sea port commissioned yesterday will significantly boost the nation's economy across value chain. Mr. Jamo, who stated this when he paid a courtesy visit on the chairman of Channels Media Group, Dr. John Momo, at Channels Television's global headquarters in Lagos, explains how the port aligns with the blue economy aspiration of the government.
The draft of that port is enough for us to stay for a number of years with that dredging. Now, and secondly, you now begins to imagine the number of ships that will come in, the number of tonnage that will come in, the number of employment, the amount of money injected into the economy. Now, for instance, that port can inject nothing less than 360 billion US dollars. Our businesses that is being taken by Benin Republic, Togo, and other countries like this now is coming back to Nigeria. And then the issue of the international trade, as far as the port is concerned, now we are on one of the riders. So blue economy is the 7th greatest economy, just behind Britain. It has the capacity of about $2.5 trillion. So this $2.5 trillion is what countries all over the world are trying to harness and maximize. How? Sustaining your own blue economy, what the oceans, can be utilized for the economic growth and development, providing jobs, providing employment, and so many other things like that. So now the ports and the ships itself is the component of the blue economy.
Meanwhile, Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu has commended the creation of best staff lubricant plants, describing it as one capable of driving investment to Nigeria. According to the governor, with such projects, the country should be reversing importation and drive foreign exchange. He was speaking during the commissioning of the best staff lubricant plant in Lagos.
President Muhammadu Buhari arrives at the premises of the MRS Oil and Gas Company on the Tinkan Island Port Road, Apapa, Lagos State. He's there to commission the Bestaf lubricant plant, said to be the largest not only in Nigeria but in sub-Saharan Africa, with capacity to produce 200 million liters of lubricant per annum, that of the 400 million liters need of lubricant in Nigeria. The low plant also has blending capacity of 3.2 million kilogram grease per annum and a labeling capacity of 200 meters per minute, up to 9-color flexo digital printing.
We are not only looking on the Nigerian market, we are also interested on the whole West African market, that we are be a centralized technology partner, not only have the Western countries, that we also prove that Africa can also maintain good quality and a high standard.
With a major interest in lubricants production, Bestaf also deals in packaging labels, grease, coolant, plastic, aerosol, and home care products.
We actually have blending capacity of about 200 million liters, and we can pack and fill 250 million liters of lubricant. What that means is that it is going to position this country in a very good economic state, so that import of lubricants should not be taken into consideration anymore.
Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Republic of Nigeria.
Best in Africa, as Bestaf is also called, is excited about what the future holds for it and its customers.
First-in-class lubricant factory that is going to increase the number of youth employment, generate a lot of revenue, reduce our export-dependent economy, and generally just blossom our economy. Mr. President is indeed excited that all of the captains of industry continue to raise above all of the odds and make our country a choice, a destination of choice.
Bestaf launched in Nigeria in 2018 and now has subsidiaries in technology, construction, payment solutions, terminal, and more.
As Nigeria moves closer to its target of 70% broadband penetration by 2024, Mafa Communications Limited, the newest entrant into Nigeria's information and communications technology space, has launched its 5G network. It is promising to make Nigeria Africa's tech hub and ensure connectivity in rural areas. Speaking at the launch and presentation of the network's brand new logo in Abuja, a chairman and founder of the company, Mr. Musbao Bashir, says that the brand's 5G network is providing not only top-notch service, but also opening up a value chain that is driving developed countries towards self-sufficiency.
A commitment to bringing the benefits of 5G services to Nigerians and deploying a network that will drive economic development with increased broadband capabilities nationwide. This is the promise of Mafa Communications as they launch their 5G network. The event has brought together government officials, Nigeria's communications regulators, and heads of financial institutions to the International Conference Center in Abuja for the culmination of a journey enabled by the rollout of the national 5G policy by the Buhari administration in January of 2022. A policy the founder and chairman of Mafa Communications is grateful for, and he promises that the launch of his 5G network will make Nigeria a leader in Africa's tech sector.
The 5G technology is not just a mobile network, but it represents a new culture, a new era of connectivity where billions of devices exchange data and instill intelligence in our everyday life.
The optimism on the impact the Mafab 5G network will have on Nigeria's ICT sector is shared by Nigeria's communications regulator.
And that today we are celebrating the rollout of services by this new entrant. This is unprecedented in the history of this country.
5G networks have had their share of controversy over the years, and the Minister of Communication and Digital Economy addresses this during his speech. He also notes the 594% growth in revenue from Nigeria's ICT sector since 2019.
The quarterly revenue generation in ICT sector by August 2019, when I took over, was around 51 billion naira. But today, based on the independent assessment of these organizations, the revenue generation quarterly from the sector is 480 billion naira.
Mafa 5G Network's logo encompasses the three key elements of the brand: the bars, the universal sign for connectivity, and the letter M that stands for the brand name. And as broadband penetration in Nigeria has increased to 47.36% as of December of 2022, Mafab Communications Limited is promising that its 5G network will go a long way in ensuring connectivity in all parts of Nigeria.
Yes, Jeffrey Zonor with more business news.
Thanks, Amachi, and welcome to Business News. First Bank of Nigeria Limited has held its 2023 edition of its Nigeria Economic Outlook event in Lagos. According to the bank, the Nigeria Economic Outlook webinar is a viable opportunity for anyone to be informed on key trends and activities that will shape the global socioeconomic landscape in 2023.
Coming off the back of recession induced by COVID, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the coming census and general elections, experts have predicted 2023 for Nigeria as a watershed year. First Bank knows this, so it has organized for its customers and potential customers this convocation, Nigerian Economic Outlook 2023, to understand navigational sets as a plan for business growth and acceleration.
The World Bank in the Global Economic Prospect issued last
Dr. Biodun Adedipe opens deliberations with these notes.
Your company should give more attention to digitization. We call it end-to-end digitization. We expect the Nigerian GDP to grow by between 3.27% and 3.32%. The inflation rate, we expect will moderate this year, but still remain double digit. Thirdly, monetary policy normalization will start as early as the second quarter of this year.
Inflation rates, African Continental Free Trade Area, regional hostilities will impact the output of things, including energy. Those discussions leads a panel analysis of the subject matters.
A little later in the year, we will start to have some degree of a serious attempt towards a little more currency management that's more flexible, and then FX rate convergence, which means that liquidity will then flow in. So in the interim, what do we advise customers to do? We advise you to try and reduce exposure, which means exploring opportunities that exist in the I&E market, aside from relying or trying to rely solely on the central bank's auction.
Cross-border opportunities will grow. First Bank says it will help you through.
First Bank has put together a basket of advice and experts to assist them. This is our SME Connect.
Towards the second half of the year as well, I think you would see some changes around forex policy, albeit slow, because the government will probably want to focus more on fuel subsidy removal first and see how that takes effect before start to see aggressive forex policy changes, which would eventually happen.
Overall, there is an optimistic macroeconomic outlook, whether for FX hedging tool, SME support, or breaking into new regional frontiers. First Bank's management says you've got a partner on your side.
Now, the total collection on stamp duty by the Central Bank of Nigeria between 2016 till date is pegged at over 378 billion naira. This was disclosed today by the CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele in Abuja at the Monetary Policy Committee meeting. Mr. Emefiele, who has been speaking on the alleged missing 89 trillion naira stamp duty, says forensic audit is ongoing in banks to resolve the controversy. And away from that, the equities market made its first retreat this week. In today's trading session, despite gains in Dangote Cement and other large caps. Ladi Williams tells us more.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. And the bear takes the close today. And it's not by a big margin. There's 0.09%, 52,612 points for the all-share index. Also market cap, 28.656 trillion. Let's look at the activity chart there. See some sell pressure. See volume more than what we had yesterday. 175 million units of stocks valued at 4.78 billion naira. We see deals. That's in the red. Let's look at the top gainers counter now. We see M-Benefit topping that counter there. 33 kobo, up 10%. See Unilever, that's 12 naira, 20 kobo there, up 9.91%. If we look at the losers counter now, we see Cavitin up there, down 9.52%. And even though it's a pullback today, we have a positive market breadth. And this loss is coming, on the day the CBN Monetary Policy Committee raised rates by 100 basis points. So maybe that's why we're seeing investors react to that. Even though 2022, the market outperformed even with 500 basis points rate hike. And that's the Stock Market Report. I'm Ladi Williams. It's back to you.
And that's it on business news. I'm Jeffrey Uzoma. He's back to Amarachi for the rest of the news at 10.
Thanks, Jeffrey. More classified documents have been discovered in the United States, this time in the home of the country's former Vice President, Mike Pence. Discovered by a lawyer for Mr. Pence at his Indiana home last week, documents have been handed over to the FBI. In another development, there's been a third shooting in the U.S. state of California. Simon Pusey has more in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. The US state of California is reeling from its third mass shooting in 8 days after a man shot dead 7 former co-workers south of San Francisco.
Come here, hands up!
Suspect Jiao Chun-li, a 67-year-old man, was arrested after driving to a police station. Eyewitness footage showed police with handguns raised speaking to the suspect, then pinning him onto the ground and detaining him. The attacks took place in the coastal city of Half Moon Bay. The victims were all Chinese-American farm workers. It comes as the state mourns the death of 11 people at Monterey Park, about 6 hours southeast of Half Moon Bay, during Lunar New Year celebrations. Poland has officially asked Germany for permission to export a host of Leopard 2 battle tanks to Ukraine in a move which raises pressure on Berlin to make a decision on the issue. The German government says it received the request to export 14 German-made tanks on Tuesday, but it has insisted the final decision lies with Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Ukraine sees the tanks as vital for breaking through Russian lines and to beat an anticipated counteroffensive. The judge leading the investigation into the devastating port explosion in Beirut in 2020 has reportedly charged more key figures as part of his probe. Judicial sources say Tarek Bitar has unexpectedly charged Lebanon's top public prosecutor, the then premier, and other senior current and former officials in connection with the devastating explosion. More than 200 people were killed when ammonium nitrate that was being stored unsafely at a port warehouse ignited. The blast it created was one of the worst non-nuclear explosions in recent history. There is no official confirmation of the identities of those who have been charged or detail of what indictments they may face. Jacinda Ardern has taken part in her last political engagement as New Zealand's Prime Minister and said she was ready to be a backbench MP, a sister and a mother.
Oh, this feels like a really special day to me.
Days after announcing that she would step down, the 42-year-old arrived at an annual gathering of politicians and Maori elders north of the capital of Wellington and spoke of the kindness and empathy shown to her. Although she became a target for hate and online abuse by right-wing extremists, she said she was leaving the job with love in her heart. Ardern will resign on Wednesday and be replaced by the new Labour Party leader, Chris Hipkins. Taliban officials say at least 124 people have died in freezing temperatures in Afghanistan in the past fortnight. A government spokesman said about 70,000 livestock had also perished in what is the coldest winter in a decade. Many aid agencies suspended operations in recent weeks after the Taliban banned Afghan women from working for non-governmental organizations. Temperatures should increase in the coming days, but there are still fears of a rising death toll of both Afghans and their livestock. Fresh fighting has erupted in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo despite an agreement between the government and rebel groups to end hostilities. The fighting between the army and M23 rebels on Tuesday is said to have caused many people to flee their homes. The military has not commented on the latest fighting, but a spokesman for the rebels accused government forces of attacking their positions as they prepared to further withdraw, as outlined in an agreement reached in Andorra's capital, Luanda. And the official match ball of the FIFA Women's World Cup has been launched in spectacular fashion, travelling over the iconic Sydney skyline. A huge model of the ball was carried by helicopter before being lowered at Marks Park, overlooking Bondi Beach. The ball is a celebration of the cultures of both host countries and features designs by Aboriginalist artist Cherney Sutton and Maori artist Fiona Collis. Its name reflects the coming together of Australia and New Zealand as host nations of the tournament. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the channel's studios in Lagos.
Many thanks, Simon. Welcome to Sports News. Premier League clubs have already shattered the previous spending record for the January transfer window with about a week still to go. Well, the financial services firm Deloitte said that as of today, top flight sides' gross spend was £440 million, surpassing the previous highest mark of £430 million set in January 2018. Funded by their new owners, Chelsea have fueled the English top flight's record-breaking in January. Well, Deloitte added that gross spending by Premier League clubs for the 2022-23 season is therefore £2.4 billion, with a new winter record following the record-breaking £1.9 billion spent last summer. Manager Erik ten Hag has insisted that Manchester United have a good opportunity to win their first trophy since 2017. Man United have been criticised by their fans for the club's trophy drought, with the team last winning silverware back in 2017 as they won the UEFA Europa League and the League Cup under Jose Mourinho. But Man United have improved under Erik ten Hag and are the only English team to remain in contention in 4 competitions this season: the Premier League, League Cup, FA Cup and the Europa League. Former Portugal boss Fernando Santos has been appointed as the new head coach of Poland with the task of qualifying the country for the 2024 European Championship in Germany. Santos led Portugal to victory at Euro 2016 and the 2019 UEFA Nations League, but quit after their exit in the World Cup quarterfinals at the hands of Morocco in Qatar. Santos previously managed Greece from 2010 to 2014 and led them to the Euros and World Cup, where they exited at the quarterfinals and round of 16. And that's Sports News. I'm Ayotunde Balu.
Thanks, Ayotunde. And the main news again. The National Assembly today demanded an extension of CBN's deadline for the return of old naira notes by 6 months, just as the House of Representatives moved to probe complaints of shortage of the new notes by banks. Also today, the Central Bank of Nigeria said there would be no extension of return of old naira notes beyond January 31st deadline, as its Monetary Policy Committee raised the lending rate to 17.5%. That is the news at 10 tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Good night and stay safe.